All right, good evening. I'd like to call the February 1st North Bend Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. First, we'll start with the commissioner roll call. Brian,
Present.
James,
Present.
Olivia, present, Juliana,
Present.
and I'm present. Hannah is excused for the evening, so we do have a quorum if you need to vote. Second, we have public comment, non-agenda items. At this time, we'd like to consider comments from the general public regarding non-agenda items. As a reminder, there'll be no dialogue between the commissioners and the public. The commissioners are listening and considering your comment. This time is for public comments based on non-agenda items. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand or make a comment in the chat box on Zoom. To keep the meeting orderly and efficient, I'll call on you. Please state your name, address for the record before sharing your comment. You'll have 3 minutes. Is there anyone that'd like to do any sort of non-agenda item comment? Right.
And there's no one on other than Brian on the.
All right. So we've opened and closed at 6:32 p.m. All right. Next, we want to go over the minutes from our last meeting, January 18th. Commissioners, if you have that chance to look at it, see if there's any corrections or changes, now's the time to address them. I'll give you a moment and then we'll take a motion to approve.
Commissioner Ball, I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for our planning commission January 18th meeting.
Is there a second? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, so moved. All right, we are on to our next item, number 4. Today, we're going to have an introduction to the parks element to the comprehensive plan by the city, and presenting today from the city is,
Principal Planner Mike McCarty.
there we go.
All
You have the
right.
floor.
Okay. So apologize if you've seen this already. What tonight's meeting is more about doing is just kind of setting the table for you guys to let you know what the parks element is and what we're doing. So this is the same presentation that I gave back in November at our Parks Public Workshop. So it's to bring you guys up to speed with what we're doing. We're not planning for you guys to do any deliberation on the parks element tonight. Your next meeting will be with the Parks Commission, and that'll be a joint meeting and a public hearing. And so then once you've had that public hearing, just as normal, you'll be deliberating, but this time jointly with the Parks Commission. And your deliberation might go on to another meeting after that. But then what we'll be looking for is a joint recommendation by the Parks Commission and the Planning Commission. And then that would go off to City Council. So rather than have two separate recommendations, one out of the Parks Commission on one version, and maybe have edits that the Planning Commission wants, it's made more sense just to do them together. So that's why we're going to have a joint meeting. So the presentation though, and Brian, you're confirmed that you can see this and hear it okay?
I can.
All right. So again, this is a presentation I gave at the workshop that we had on November 30th. And we had some folks there, and thank you again for braving the snowstorm. That night turned out to be an absolute blizzard. And so it was a little bit weird having an in-person meeting that night, but went through it. Now the down keys aren't working. No, come on. They were working a little bit ago there. I just had to wake up. So you'll see some of this is directed more to the public than the Parks Commission or than the Planning Commission. But just to give you a little bit of background about what the purpose of the workshop was to give folks an understanding of why we're doing the update. So I'll go through that with you guys as well, and then to hear from the public. So first of all, what the parks element is, you're familiar with our comprehensive plan. The parks element is one of the required chapters or required elements of our comprehensive plan. And that's required under the Growth Management Act. And it's really essentially our park master plan. It's guiding the development of our park and recreation resources within the city. So what it contains, first of all, is just a inventory What parks do we have? What facilities do we have within those parks? It includes a demand and needs assessment where we're looking at what are the desires of our residents? What are our facilities that we have and what do we anticipate needing based on those desires? We've got levels of service standards. And so those are standards that you're providing for each type of park facility. So like baseball fields, we have a level of service standard saying we need one baseball field per so much population. Those level of service standards then are what guide us in seeking additional facilities. We've got goals and policies, just like every comprehensive plan element does. And those are just the kind of broad statements of intent and purpose for planning our park system. And then we implement all that with our Parks Capital Improvement Plan. We've got a 20-year long park capital improvement plan that's looking a long ways out. It's more visionary. These are all the types of projects that we'd like to have. But then we narrow that down with a 6-year Parks Capital Facilities Plan that says these are our top priorities. And this is what we want to actually spend money on in the next 6 years. So why we're doing the update? It's required. So every 10 years under Growth Management Act, cities are required to update their comp plans. We are in that cycle right now, and the parks element and the transportation element were the first at the gate. You guys have made your recommendation on the transportation element now. So next comes the parks element to you. The big reason, other than it's required, is that we want to do it for money. So we want funds to be able to implement our park projects. We can't afford to do it on our own as a city, so we rely heavily on grants. So those grants come from the state, principally from the State Recreation and Conservation Office. And to be eligible for those grants, you have to have your plan certified by that Recreation and Conservation Office. That's one of the reasons we're doing the update. Also, just to update outdated information, we've been successful in implementing a lot of the projects that are currently on our Parks Capital Facilities Plan over the last 6 years. So it's time to reevaluate that and to take off the projects that we've completed and to reprioritize for projects that we haven't yet done, that we want to then up on the list or add additional projects based on what we've heard from the public. And last is, again, just hearing from the public. We want to make sure that what we're planning is consistent with what the public is desiring. So what are we doing in the update more specifically? Those level of service standards, we've heard from the public in our survey information about their needs. And so we've got some proposed revisions to those levels of service standards. We've got updated population figures. State Office of Financial Management puts out population current estimates and projections. And so based on that information, we're updating our population forecasts, and that then in turn influences what we need to provide based on our levels of service standards. So the principal thing that has guided the work of the Parks Commission to date is the public input. So Parks Commission's been working on this for quite a while, and for probably about a year. And a lot of the work occurred during the summer. They did a number of booths at the North Bend Block Party, or not the block party, the farmers market, to gather public input about what people would like to see, both outreach and input about the process. They had the public workshop on November 30th, and we had a survey. I'll go a little bit more into that survey in a little bit, but that really told us a lot more of the public's interest. So 2 pieces of survey information that they relied on. The first was SciView's survey. So SciView in 2021 conducted their community and interest in opinion survey. And a lot of that was related more to their programming, so things that they would do kind of inside a building or with staff to provide recreation services. But some of it was relevant to North Bend. First of all, it's overall relevant because we are within SciView's park service area. So what their residents are saying and what the participants of their survey were saying are largely North Bend residents as well. So some of those questions that were relevant, let me go into that further. Desire for park and recreation facilities. So the question was potential programming spaces that households would use if they were available. And you can see the top of that list is nature trails, soft surface. People really wanted to see more of that, followed by paved trails, canoe and kayak access, and mountain bike park trails. The further down the list you go there, you can start to see things that are more programming related, so not necessarily things that the city would be providing, but a number of different things. And then interestingly, when you get to the bottom of the list is more of your conventional contact sports. So your baseball and football, et cetera.
No soccer?
Oh, is it on there? I don't see it. There's other questions for that. The other question that was relevant was programming spaces household would use most often. And so again, at the top of their survey, you see nature trails is the top response, and then dog parks, mountain bike parks, paved trails. And then again, it gets more into some of the programming type of activities. So that was a first point of information for the Parks Commission to consider. We wanted something more specific to facilities rather than programming though. So the City of North Bend staff and the Parks Commission put out a survey in the summertime. So we conducted that in the month of September. We received 537 responses to that survey, which we felt was a fantastic response. So this was not a scientific survey. So we're not doing analysis of
Double blind.
times of, the responses and so forth, but at 537 responses, we do feel like that is the voice of North Bend, a pretty accurate representation.
In 1 month.
Yeah.
Good.
We posted it all over the place on social media. We posted signs up at all of our parks. Just anywhere we could get the word out, we did. So questions that we asked is how people access parks, how satisfied they are with existing facilities, what are their priorities for acquisition and development, satisfaction with maintenance of parks, and we always want to understand the context of who's responding, so general demographic information. First of all, why people visit parks. And if you look at the list here, the majority is more passive recreation. So people want to walk, they want to relax, connect with nature. And then the more contact sports are a little bit lower in the list. So we're generalists. We want to go out and enjoy, but we're not there necessarily for a specific sport. And then we asked a number of questions about how people feel we're providing specific facilities. And I'm just providing the kind of top questions. There was a whole bunch of questions that we asked, and then a lot of opportunities as well for individual responses. So I'm just summarizing some of the highest, most interesting and highest response questions. So how do people feel that we're doing with walking and biking trails? And that was a pretty even split, just a little bit more folks saying that we don't have enough bike and hiking trails. Passive and natural open space areas. So those are undeveloped, not developed with formal park facilities, but just a lot of green space like Meadowbrook Farm or Tollgate Farm. Again, slight majority of people saying that we don't have enough of that, but pretty even split.
Actually, it says that we have them.
Just, 51%. Okay.
No, this,
Oh, no.
it's reverse. Yeah, it's reverse color.
That was normal.
And then getting more into our formal parks, neighborhood and community parks with playground equipment, people really do feel like we have plenty of that, according to that, the response of 62% there. Unprogrammed open lawn areas. So this is within our parks, spaces that aren't dedicated to a specific sport or activity, the grass lawn. And people, again, felt like we seem to have plenty of that at 64%. Water facilities. This was one of our most interesting responses that we received. And we asked this question in a number of different ways, a lot of our questions in different ways to get an overall perspective. And this is the strongest response that we got of any of the survey questions. People really felt like we do not have enough water access. So one of the things the Parks Commission wants to come back to later on, maybe for this year's work program, is to understand that a little bit more. What do people mean by that water access? Because we didn't ask specifically, are you looking to kayak? Are you looking to swim? Just generally, people want more water access. The challenge that you see, though, that I've noted there is we don't have much shoreline property under city ownership. A lot of the shoreline in North Bend is privately owned or along along the levees is often private property. And so there's limited places that we can provide improvements to provide that access. Getting more into our contact sports, baseball and softball fields. Very slight majority of people say that we need more of that. Soccer, on the other hand, the very large majority at 81% felt like we do have enough soccer fields presently. Tennis courts, majority feel like we do have enough tennis courts. Pickleball, this was an interesting response. When we asked the question directly, do we have enough of that? It was, again, a pretty even split. However, we provided a lot of opportunities for write-in responses, and we saw over and over again with the write-in responses that people want more pickleball courts. So there was a little bit of an inconsistency there. And the way that I would interpret that meaning is that we have a group of very passionate pickleball players who want more. It's not necessarily the general public, but we do have a group that's really wanting to see more pickleball.
Where was that picture?
That's over at Sideview Park. It's where they've got pickleball striped over basketball. And basketball courts, 68%, large majority folks say that there is enough basketball courts. Volleyball courts, same thing. People generally feel like we have enough of that. We've got one specific volleyball court and then a couple of multi-sport courts. Thing we don't have right now, though, is sand volleyball courts. So that's something that the Parks Commission talked about. I'll get to in a second.
Big cat box.
Yeah.
So then we ask kind of a ranked question of what's your top priority for additional facilities, not how satisfied are you with civic facilities, but what is your top priority? What do you want to see? And the very top priority that we saw, again, was river access. People want to be able to reach the river to do different things. And then following that is trails of different sorts, soft surface trails and then paved trails. So again, our passive sports are really top priority. And then at the bottom is when you get more into the very specific contact sports like baseball and basketball and so forth. Priorities for new facilities. So these are facility types that are not currently provided in North Bend or not really provided. And at the top again is developed river access facilities. So there we got a little bit more specific in that it was a safe and easy way to access the water for picnicking, wading, swimming, etc. So that was the top response, followed by splash parks. So, you know, the kind of little water features that are in a lot of parks these days where you press a button and the water comes out. A lot of people wanted to see that. And then off-leash dog park after that and pea patch garden plots after that. So different facilities that we don't have available. So what has the Parks Commission done with that information? So again, we're looking at an update to the parks element, and they wanted to distill that information and make it applicable to an update so that we can then respond to the public with developing actual features that people want. So these are our park level of service standards. So again, this works like the first one there, baseball or softball field. We currently have a standard of one field per 1,000 population. That standard was set by North Bend Parks Commission probably 15, 20 years ago in response to a fairly active youth participation in baseball and soccer and so forth. So our standards tend to be higher than a lot of other comparable city standards, but we are very active here. So looking at that standard and thinking back to what the responses were in the survey, the public was saying, we generally have enough, but we're close to needing more. And so looking at our standard and compared with where we're at with population, we'll need one by 2029, but we don't need one now. So reading those two together, we feel like we're probably in about the right spot with that level of service standard. Soccer, on the other hand, the response from the public was really, we have plenty of soccer fields, or people didn't see the need for more soccer fields. But our level of service standard was telling us that we needed 2 by 2029. So we thought that might need adjustment. So the Parks Commission has recommended lowering that level of service standard from 2,000 to 2,500.
I have a question. So,
Mhm.
maybe we don't want to add a soccer field, but is there plans for improving what we already have?
That's certainly a possibility. Yeah.
Okay.
Basketball courts, tennis courts and basketball courts. The Parks Commission recommended just leaving those as is. So in both cases, the public wasn't really gung-ho to get more of the facilities, but at the same time, these are smaller facilities that can overlay other facilities easily. And so it's, good bang for your buck to be able to get these things. So it's not a lot of investment to be able to develop them. Whereas a baseball field or a soccer field is a lot more space dedicated to a single purpose sport. There was previously a multiple recreation court standard, and the Parks Commission recommended going away from that because it was volleyball together with pickleball, and really those are not that compatible of a sport. So generally, if you're playing volleyball outdoors, you want to play on a soft surface. You don't want to skin your knee up on concrete and go for a dive. Whereas pickleball, you need a hard surface. So Parks Commission has recommended splitting that standard. And instead, we're going to have a pickleball court standard and a sand volleyball court standard. So the pickleball court standard, they have increased the level of service standard because previously we were not scheduled to get any pickleball courts, but we did hear from the public that was an interest. They've raised that standard, and very sorry to, this table is really hard to read at this scale. But it is showing that we will need 4 additional pickleball courts by 2044 under the revised standard.
And 2 by 2029, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, 1 pickleball court for every 500 people that.
1,500 people.
1,500, okay, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of pickleball. Okay, thank you.
But they're so vocal.
So sand volleyball is an added standard. We didn't have that previously, and we've set it fairly low, recognizing there wasn't a huge demand from the public, 1 per 5,000. But what that means that we'll need 2 sand volleyball courts by 2044. One of them is underway. So at our new Dahlgren Family Park, we're going to be putting in sand volleyball. That'll satisfy one of those. We previously had a golf level of service standard, but the Parks Commission felt we really don't need to provide that. That's not something that municipalities typically provide. They're expensive, they're hard to maintain, and the private market handles that just fine. So we are proposing to eliminate the golf level of service standard. The others we have left alone. The standards based on the public input for various things seem to have general correlation between where the standard's at and what the public was desiring. The pool we've left in there, and we won't actually meet that need until 2044, but that enables the city, should we choose to do so, to apply park impact fees to a proposal that Sideview might put together in the future to support a pool. Okay, so just a little bit of background information about how we're funding our park and trail improvements. So any of these projects have to be on our park capital facilities plan in order for us to expend park impact fees. So park impact fees are our primary mechanism for funding improvements locally, or at least providing match to grants. So every time that there's a new residence built in North Bend, multifamily or single family, there's an associated park impact fee for that. And no problem. The intent of that park impact fee is that you're maintaining those level of service standards by providing a fee that represents the proportional share of that new facility, so that the new multifamily or single family residence is adding its own burden to our system. And so its proportional share is calculated based on the cost to provide so many tennis courts and baseball fields and so forth with our level of service standards, divided broadly by the population. You can get that proportional share. So that park impact fee is collected, we put it into a pot, and then we can expend those park impact fees on eligible projects that are on our parks capital facilities plan.
So how much is that?
How-
percentage for impact fee?
How much is each
One
unit?
Yeah,
I think it's about 4,000 for multifamily and maybe like 55, 6,000 for a single family.
so $6,000 for a single family.
And that's just off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, but something around there.
How did I come up with that number?
We had a actual financial group that does that type of thing, prepare a report for us. And we'll have to have them update it once we've adopted our parks element updates, because it's based on your population and your level of service standards. So both of those have changed since the time of our last update. So they'll have to run those figures again and prepare an updated park impact fee figure. So park impact fees is our biggest pot. Then we've got development exactions is an opportunity. So that's things where you're dedicating things like land or constructed improvements that a specific development is providing as another means of addressing the impacts that they create. So an example of that is when John Day Homes provided the Ranger Station cottages. As a part of the development mitigation for that, they constructed the picnic shelter at Ferguson Park. So that was a development exaction.
Is there a method for, I'm assuming not, but is there a method for those sort of dedications being applied to the fee?
No, it's actually a separate mechanism.
Right.
So there's
those dedications then don't affect the fee.
no, they don't. Because there's two pots of, or two ways to mitigate impacts. There's the park impact fees, which are broadly applied based on our level of service standards.
Right.
And then there's also on-site recreation requirements, and that's where this one came from. They didn't have room to reasonably provide on-site recreation space for like a picnic shelter on those in that development. So instead of trying to cram it in, they agreed to build something in an adjacent park.
I guess my question there though really boils down to when you have something like a dedication of a full park area that gives you, like you're saying, volleyball.
Mhm.
There's no method for that to
right.
then
No, that,
practically come back to the fee and change.
yeah, that's actually something we want to bring back to the planning commission and the parks commission later this year, is an update to our impact fee regulations to allow that to be counted.
Sure.
Because if it's an improvement that's on our parks capital facilities plan and the developer is building it, they should get credited for that. There's not a mechanism to allow that right now, but we feel like that's fair and that's appropriate. So that's an amendment that we're bringing back to you guys.
I guess inherently though, it would have to be like future fees are going to stay the same until you do the math again.
Yeah.
When the change happens to the.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
So when they're doing this whole housing assessment deal about low income housing, how housing is so expensive, have they considered the impact fees increases the expenses for
Mhm.
housing rent?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that we're looking to also to lower some of our park level of service standards. Because if it's not something that our population really wants, why are we then including that? Because that's driving up the cost for those impacts.
Do we feel like if we are trying to lower the impact fees during development, just overall cost less, then it would be sold for less? Is that our hope in the end?
That's the hope, yeah. That's always the
It's
question of what
It's
actually
not gonna
happens.
be the developers just gonna get a deal because the market will in the end.
Yeah, but
like,
I mean, everybody has to do their part, so.
Yeah,
Well, it's not just developers, right? Single families, anything.
There's a
you know,
lot
they
of,
do those
yeah,
fees.
stand up, there's a lot of single people just trying to build something and if they, what's a shame is that they have to sell their property to someone else to develop because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Because there's too many impact fees and they've had that property for a long time. They should be able to do the same thing that developers are doing, develop their property. So when they get chased out because there are all these fees and they just can't do it. Kind of unfair to those people. as
Yeah,
well.
but that's all the more reason to push for the developers to be paying for these, like Dalton Park, like that's,
yeah,
those sort of things are a big hit to the developer cost wise. While also covering this LOS for us, right, the things that we want to get done anyway.
Right.
The developer's paying a big chunk of money to get that park in, which then unfortunately it takes a while, but then those fees come down because the city's not paying for that. We're not then expecting those impact fees of all the developments to pay for that sand volleyball parks at some point in the future,
Mhm.
right, something like that. So it's,
Right, I guess, I wonder if there's like a level of who is a developer? I mean, is it the multi-millionaire guys that are doing this
Well,
all over the place? Or-
Again, applies uniformly to all
Yeah.
residential development because everything's assumed to be a proportional
Right.
share of the burden.
Well, the guys that are multi-million dollar, developers have a lot more buying power because of, they get bank deals that the small guys.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that.
And in the future, we do want to look at ways to make the application of impact fees more equitable based on the cost of the home or the size of the home. So if you're building a McMansion, you probably should be paying a little bit more share for impact fees than if you're building a really, a 1,200 square foot cottage. 'Cause it-
Yeah.
could we ever have it be also like a number of how many you're building? So like if you're building a mansion or a little house versus 12 of them. Like.
Or 50.
Well, again,
it's
it's
based on per unit, right? So that
Yeah.
if you go 12, you're paying 12 fees.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
then could make it be that that person can't do it because it's too expensive. See what I'm saying? It's like,
so messy.
It is.
I think in the end, you fall back on this is how it's done. And it's done this way for a reason, right? People have done this for a long time. Cities have done this for a long time. And this is the standard.
Impact fees are also very solid legally. Exactions, development exactions can get a little squishier because they're subject to tests of both nexus and rough proportionality, meaning that you have to very specifically tie the impact of what you're asking to the impact of who those, the people that are moving in. And that's a lot harder to do than an impact fee that's just already calculated. Just
Can't
pay
just
your
wait,
amount.
okay, well, we want you to build this for us and we'll let you do that.
yeah. So is there like a percentage of like what the fees are, like based on someone's building a house? So you gotta do sidewalks, you gotta do all these improvements. Then you've got these extra impact fees. One of them could be the parks, there could be other impact fees. What's the percentage of all that based on what the building of the house? Is it like 25% of?
It is the largest, the impact fees are the largest share of the city costs.
So,
I don't know about like construction issues, but in terms of permitting and permit fees, it's the
Mhm.
largest share.
okay, I'm curious,
Like,
like,
you're not talking about 25% of the cost of the building the house in total. It's not that much. It's right, your impact fee, your city fees to build, to do the construction. I was assume is not it's nowhere near 25% of the total cost of doing the development in general. Like the construction, everything else, that's.
I'm curious, I don't know what the number would be. I mean, you've
It
got
depends. That's up to.
sewer, you've got water, you've got electrical, you've got LPAC, you've got sea lights, and then we've got some new improvements on how we do the street, the sidewalks. And then on top of it, now we're gonna have other impact fees like this. And I don't know if there's other impact fees besides parks. Are there others?
Yeah, so there's water, there's sewer, stormwater, roads and
Transportation.
parks.
Is transportation impact fee as well?
Road, yes,
And
streets, yeah.
schools, did you say?
Schools, yes.
Schools, that's a.
Okay, so if there's schools in there. Now, I thought property tax took care of the schools.
It's also impact fee funded. So again, it's based on your level of service standards. So if you're establishing that you want to have so many pupils per teacher, then you need so many classrooms, then the school district needs to build more facilities and somebody needs to pay for that. So and each new development that's coming in is adding burden to that. So that's where the impact fees come in.
Well, I understand that. Recently I looked and it was like more than 50% of our property taxes going to schools. I mean, and the city is only getting like this little sliver, but I mean, it could have been like 60% is going to schools. So part of me is going like, well, where's this money going? That's a lot of money. And then on top of that, I know. But have you seen the portables? It's like, so where's the money going? Is a question I have. And then on top of that, you're going to do impact fees. So I'm kind of like, do we do audits on where the funds, where the property taxes go and impact fees?
Impact fees, yeah. So impact fees are very specifically limited to what's on a capital facilities plan.
Mhm.
So we can't go freely spending on that and, whatever council chooses at the moment. It has to be on a list, on
Okay.
a plan.
Well, that's a little bit more comforting. I don't think that's happening with property taxes.
Okay. A few other pots of money to note. We receive a share of the King County Parks levy. So we get about 100,000 each year from the county to apply toward park projects. And then grants again are a really big funding source. And that's why having our plan certified by the state is important for that purpose.
Who provides those grants? Is it like-
The State Recreation Conservation Office provides direct grants from state sources, but they also administer a lot of federal funding. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund, that comes from oil and gas leases and so forth from the federal government. The National Park Service has a number of different funds, and those are administered most typically through the State Recreation Conservation Office.
Do we have someone in the city that's applying for these like yearly? We talk about it a lot, okay.
All right, and then finally, partnerships. That's another way that we make projects happen. So SiView has their own bond and their own parks capital facilities plan that overlaps largely with the cities or projects within the city. And so we work together to make these projects happen. So I'm just going to note, this was more for public interest, but you guys will find it interesting as well. Brian, did you have a question?
No, just reorienting myself.
All right, and I am admitting Valerie King. And Valerie, I apologize if you've been waiting a while. I just noticed that, or somebody pointed it out to me. So noting a few specific projects that are in progress that we have funded through these park impact fees and that have been on our parks capital improvement plans. Also, I'll note some things that are not necessarily on our current plan, but that the Parks Commission has added accordingly. So Tollgate Farm, you guys have seen the improvements going on out there. We've got the new barn going in and the farmstead area. So the new parking lot will serve as public access to the farm as a whole, but also that area with the new barn is to serve as an agricultural preparation station for things that are grown on Tollgate Farm. So you've seen some of the new subleases. We've got Frisky Girl Farms, we've got Barrow Women Farm, raising hogs and sheep and sunflowers and I think in the future some vegetables. So the intent is that the barn is truly a barn, but also an agricultural prep station. So they can then prepare crops that they've grown there for sale at farmers markets.
So do they lease that?
Yes.
Or, okay. Cool.
Okay. Dahlgren Family Park, this is an exciting one that is in progress and we expect to be completed by the end of this year. So we're working in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources to implement this project. And this is another example of partnership working together. So we applied jointly with DNR for a grant that leveraged the acquisition of this site through again, a developer exaction. The Dahlgren developer dedicated the eastern 4 acres of their property for public park. And we worked with the Department of Natural Resources to prepare a plan and to construct those improvements. So that's underway, and we'll have, again, a sand volleyball court there, a new picnic shelter, a restroom, play equipment, and trails. And the overall benefit, the biggest benefit here is also that it's providing new access directly into the adjacent King County Tanner Landing Park. And in King County, through this grant, the county will be constructing new whitewater access improvements, so a way to get to the river.
Where can we find this like detailed project?
I can provide you
Oh,
all sorts of
All
information on that.
Yeah, all right.
Who, cleans this, like, does the Parks Department go in and like cleans up the parks and like keeps it nice?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it- Or the city?
Not the adjacent Tanner Landing Park, that's King County's
Yeah.
ownership,
Oh,
So
but
like this part, like the parks,
that will be under our control.
oh,
okay, so.
Okay, Tenant Trailhead Park, another great one that's coming soon. So we did a groundbreaking on this a week and a half ago. And the Sideview Metropolitan Park District is leading the effort. They're coordinating the work with the watershed company. And the very first phase is broken ground, and that's constructing the trails. The second phase will be starting this summer. We've been waiting for funding from King County. King County is another partner in this. And that'll construct a parking lot and a larger trail connection to get you up on the Rattlesnake Mountain and over to Snoqualmie Point Park in Snoqualmie. So this was another one that was a big expense, but working together, securing grants, we were able to acquire what was to become I don't remember the number of units, probably like 40 or 50 units subdivision that was up on the side of the mountain. And there was a lot of reasons that the council was not excited about that. It, very visible. You'd be looking up at a new subdivision where right now you see a nice green forest.
where is this exactly?
This is just south of I-90. You know where the Arrive apartments are? Or the,
Right at exit 31.
exit 31
Mhm.
across from the Ala Mall.
Mm,
So up on the side of the hill there.
Okay.
So new mountain bike park and trailhead. Riverfront Park, we've got the planning process underway for this right now. And this is again in response to that desire for the public to be able to reach and access the water. So this is a small piece of property that we have. The primary limitation is it's got a lot of floodplain constraints and some wetlands. Our intent is to leave this as a forested site, but to provide some access improvements so that people have easier access to the river.
I understand there's like a lot of homeless people along there.
There's some.
Is there, how are we handling that? As a city?
Yeah, that's a careful planning process. You want to be able to open up places so that the general public feels welcome. You obviously can't put up signs that say no homeless, but if you design in a way that everyone feels more welcome, it's maybe less inviting to those that want to just loiter.
Are they going to be lights in there or
Not likely.
what type of?
Possibly some like trail lights,
Mhm.
but not any kind of big light up the whole area. Again, we're leaving this as predominantly a natural site.
Mhm.
But the planning process is underway for this right now. We have site workshop, a consultant working on preparing the plans for this, and then William H. Taylor Park. So you guys are all welcome and very welcome to participate in that process. We'll have more meetings in the future. So William H. Taylor Park, that's the other part of this that we have site workshop working on. In this case, the intent is to better connect downtown with the park. Right now, if you look along Ballarat Avenue, you don't really even know that there's a park there because there's a row of railroad tracks, row of cars, kind of heavy vegetation, and it just looks like a dead end. It doesn't look like something that's inviting you in.
Mhm.
So we want to connect that better, make better use of the space for potential future city events. And also welcome people off the train more into downtown North Bend.
So have they come up with any ideas on that yet, or are they still? in
It's still in the very early process. So we had some public workshops at the beginning of the month here where we gathered public input, and site workshop is now taking that public input, and they'll be developing some alternative scenarios that then come back to the city and the public to kind of rank. Torgerson Park, this is not yet implemented, but on our 6-year capital improvement plan currently. So when we did our major park improvements, well, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, to add the new western ball fields and the new plaza and so forth, one of the intents was to have the central gathering plaza right off the parking lot next to the playground and the picnic shelter. And we ran out of funds to do that. So it wound up being kind of a half-hearted effort where we've just got this asphalt patch that's in a circle and some trip hazards around the playground. So we're wanting to really polish that and finish it off with a nicer gathering plaza plan. That'll be something coming. Meadowbrook Farm, we've got a loop trail that's proposed for the property. So right now, the only access, if you want to get back into Meadowbrook Farm, is just on your own feet, walking through mud and tall grass. And the proposal here is a loop trail that would connect through those backfields to give you access through the property and also access to Snoqualmie Middle School and the adjacent Centennial Fields Park in Snoqualmie, so that you can have a complete recreational loop. We're working with a number of partners on this, and the Snoqualmie tribe has raised some concerns about wildlife impacts and impacts to some of the character of the prairie back there. So we're trying to work through those. We do have a grant from King County to make it happen, but we're working through some of those concerns before we fully implement that project.
Yes, a box trail.
Yes, well, gravel, actually.
Or gravel, yeah.
A gravel trail.
Yeah, we had originally proposed asphalt, but we didn't get the full grant that we wanted from the state. And so we're proposing to scale that back to gravel trails. The challenge with gravel trails is they require a lot of maintenance and a lot of chemicals that are not the greatest.
What about like just like a little like wood, I'm sorry, bark, like a bark trail? Is that?
Yeah, that's really not feasible with, unless you have heavy forest cover.
Yeah.
If you've got any kind of soft surface, more so than gravel, grass will just grow straight through it very quickly and it disappears. So at a minimum, it really needs to be gravel, and then paving was preferred because you don't have the chemical treatment that you need with gravel. Other trail system improvements we've got on our capital facilities plan. We've got a connection from Bendigo Boulevard to Tennant Trailhead Park planned. That'll occur partly through development of the hotel at the LML site. We've got a trail connection, and it's actually going to be a road diet to make this happen between Tollgate Farm Park in our downtown. So we're taking North Bend Way, which is currently 4 lanes, and we won't ever need 4 lanes based on our population projections for the city and full build out. So we're going to remove 2 of those lanes and take it to a 2-lane road and use part of that right of way to convert into a multi-use trail.
What does that mean, multiple trails? Does that mean
Bicycles and pedestrians.
golf carts?
Maybe, I don't know. Some other things, we want to just continue work on the Tanner Trail. So the Tanner Trail is the one that parallels North Bend Way, going east in town. And we have been working on that over time. And we want to continue that from where it stops now, just past the Public Works, all the way out to the Snoqualmie Valley Trail Junction.
It's partly done by, and John Day, now old John Day Development, and he did.
Not John Day, but the cottages at North Bend, that was a polygon development, and they did a part of that. So part of it would occur through redevelopment of properties, but we're trying to at least focus on stuff that's unlikely to be redeveloped, stuff that has more recent houses or things that are not likely to be a subdivision where it's easier to have them do that stretch.
Yeah. And don't we get like a donation, like a.
We do, yeah. So Rainier Asphalt, the last couple of years has provided a donation and made a little section of it happen.
And then we're trying to go down to. 45th Street, that goes up into the Liverpool area.
140th,
I'm sorry,
140th.
140, that's how far as we're trying to go.
Yeah. All right. So Spray Park or Splash Park. That's another one that we heard strongly from the public that they were interested to see happen. That is actually on our capital improvement plan for a future project. So our hope is that this can be tied in with Skyview's proposal for a pool. So that their pool bond failed, but they're still in the planning process and they'll be coming back to voters again. And so the easiest way for a splash park to happen is when you're already building an aquatic center. So we can apply some of our park impact fees to help make that happen.
And it makes the most sense to have.
From a financial standpoint, yeah, because then you have fewer systems that you're trying to operate.
Yeah,
You know, same overall water and somebody there to maintain and a lot easier to do than if you're building an independent splash park on its own.
and how many times are they able to bring that back to voters, like endlessly? Or? Is there a limit?
I would think so.
Like, okay, yeah,
Not a variable limit.
Never a limit.
And then a dog park, that was another one that we heard from the public that folks really want to see. So we've got that in our 6-year capital improvement plan. There's a couple places that we could put it. So we've got the new Dahlgren Family Park that's going in, and the eastern portion of that is just kind of open, more meadow type of area. And so there could be a dog park that could be built in that area. There's also the potential to work with King County for a dog park in Tanner Landing Park. And they're exploring planning for that right now too. So we don't necessarily want to build one right next door. So we're coordinating with them to find out what their plans are. And then additional pickleball. So we heard from the public that they want to see more of those. And they're a relatively easy facility to add because often it is just a matter of striping over another facility. So we're doing that this year. Over at EJ Roberts Park, we've got the tennis courts, and we'll just add striping in a different color so that you can also play pickleball. So there's also a project on the CIP to add new courts as well within existing parks. So that could happen over at Sideview Park, that could happen with additional facilities at Tollgate Farm Park or a number of different locations. So next steps is really with you guys and the Parks Commission jointly. You'll come to hopefully a joint recommendation that'll then go on to council. We'll take it to our council committee, and likely in March or April, the council will then pass a resolution, not an ordinance, just like we did with the transportation element. It gets put into a holding pattern until the comp plan as a whole is ready to be adopted in 2024. So we'll prepare our State Environmental Policy Act review on the comp plan as a whole on all of the elements. And so the city council at this point will approve it, but not adopt it. And we'll be adopting everything together in 2024. So we've got our parks element webpage, and on there we've got links to the public hearing coming up, the survey information, and the presentation that I have tonight's on that page, as well as our draft element. So that is all I have for now, and I'm totally happy to answer questions that you guys might have. But again, our intent is not that you're deliberating tonight, but that you'll come back and jointly do that with the Planning Commission or with the Parks Commission.
Anyone do have any more questions?
Yeah.
Does anybody in the public have a question? Can you give us your name and address?
My name is Ward. That is DEES. With a 225 Sydney Avenue South in North Bend. And I represent the small North Bend neighborhood that houses 4-acre right-hand portion of Riverfront Park. I'm here to make sure you understand the impact of flooding. The citizens who live in my neighborhood have an intimate knowledge of the benefits of the park. During the last major flooding incident, the last one that we experienced, not the last one we will have. My backyard had 5 feet of water. My next door neighbor to the north had over 5 feet in his backyard. My neighbor to the south had over 4 feet. The area covers roughly 8 acres and includes the riverfront park. All the riverfront park has 5 feet of water. This is groundwater, not river water. River was full. So this is water that literally is up when we have a significant flood. The maps that we use, that Mike was using in his recent citizen meeting, show the 4-acre portion of Riverfront Park as a FEMA floodway. A floodway is where the excess water goes during the flood. It's designated by FEMA. The map also shows wetlands, fairly small wetland, but still a wetland. The area is a recharge area, the river, and water that settles in there, goes back into the river. So this portion of the park is a flood storage area. Any changes to that park will create anything, create anything other than a natural area will change the flood storage in Philadelphia. My request is that the park plan be changed. Cut the heavy infiltration of invasive plants that exist in that park and consider these selective removal of trees, but maintain that area of the park as a natural area in active flood retention.
Yeah.
And just to note that there will be a public hearing at the next Planning Commission and Parks Commission meeting. So if you're wanting to formally submit that in writing or in person, we want to also do that at the public hearing.
We're be on it.
That'll be on the 15th.
Here.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Go ahead, your name and address.
My name is Craig Leisure. I don't live there currently, but I'm probably house at 227 West Park Street, which is directly adjacent to Riverfront Park, and grew up being his neighbor. Agree with everything he said. On top of that, you know, it's like you guys, and I'll be here on the 15th. One of the things you guys are trying to establish, in my opinion, is access to the river. That parcel and the way the dikes are done, there's no access to it. No one's gonna go to that. I call it a forest in the park, but no one's gonna go to that park to access the river. So, his, you know, proposed improvements of getting out the invasive species and cleaning it up, I think would do a great deal of improvement to, making it more attractive, possibly having, you know, some people be able to go through the forest and go that's really cool. But to turn it into a park, seems a bit. So I'm here on the 15th, for the board. And I got a whole bunch of other ideas that now that I know I'm trying to stay engaged and trying to be involved, but you know, there's a lot going on, but knowing that you guys are going through the comprehensive plan, I've got a whole bunch of things I want to throw your way and see what we work through.
Great, thank you very much. Sure. All right, is there anything else?
Brian, anything from you?
No, I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay, so at this point, we can conclude this meeting and I want to thank everybody who's here, who's contributed, and we'll conclude the meeting at 7:30 p.m.
All right, thank you, guys. All right, and Brian, I'll say goodbye and stop recording here.